You might already know how important supply lines are in Fallout 4 and the benefits they provide. You might even have carefully planned a network of settlements and trading hubs that looks great on your Pip-Boy map. Or maybe you're new to the game and really don't know what supply lines are all about. Whether you've been playing Fallout 4 since day one or just getting started, this video is for you. Today, I'll cover everything you need to know about supply lines, how to set them up, how to assign provisioners, what resources are shared between settlements, and a few things to consider if you're using robots as provisioners. I also wanted to know what exactly happens out there in the Commonwealth. Do provisioners really walk between settlements? What happens when they encounter enemies? Can they be killed? And how do they get from Far Harbor to the Commonwealth? Well, I followed them to find out, and some of the answers really surprised me. I tested everything on the PC Anniversary Edition with no mods installed. And with that, let's get started. A supply line is a virtual link between two settlements, traveled by an NPC who is assigned as a provisioner. Once that link exists, all connected settlements share certain workshop resources with each other. However, not all workshop resources are shared. We'll take a look at exactly how sharing works in just a moment, but first, let's see how to set up a supply line. Settlers and robots can be assigned as provisioners. To assign one, you need the local leader perk at rank 1. Without this perk, the option to assign a provisioner won't appear. There are two ways to assign settlers to this role. The first method is to assign a settler from the settlement where you want the provisioner to be based. In the workshop mode, select a settler and choose Supply Line. A menu will appear on the screen. Select the settlement you want to create the supply line to. Accept the assignment, and the settler will immediately begin traveling between the two settlements, although the assignment may take some time to show up on the screen. The provisioner still counts as a settler at their home settlement, so they will require food, water, and a sheltered bed there. Settlers can also be quickly moved to a new settlement and assigned as a provisioner at the same time. This shortcut is a quick way to establish supply lines while also redistributing your settlement population at the same time. In workshop mode, select a settler and choose Move. Then, select a settlement to relocate them to. Confirm your selection. Next, select Supply Line. Choose the settlement that you want to create a supply line to. And finally, confirm your choice. A supply line will now be created between the settlement where you moved the settler and the settlement you selected when assigning the supply line. The settler will need food, water, and a sheltered bed at the settlement where they are moved. I found what appears to be a bug when assigning a provisioner to the Boston airport. When a supply line is established between the airport and another settlement, the Pip-Boy map can make it appear as though the supply line supports both the Boston airport and the Prydwen. Let me know in the comments if you find this bug in your game. The supply line only supports the airport. The Prydwen is not part of the supply line and does not share resources with any settlement. I also found an error when using the second method of assigning a provisioner. If you move a settler to the Boston airport and then assign them as a provisioner, the map incorrectly adds that provisioner to the population of the Prydwen instead of the Boston airport. However, if you travel to the Boston airport, the settlement's population numbers are correct. The bugs appear to be Pip-Boy display errors rather than problems with the supply line itself. When you open the Pip-Boy map, you can display your supply line network. There are no rules on how supply lines have to be arranged. There's no specific shape, order, or correct path between the settlements. A supply line only needs one thing: a connection. You can link settlements to a central hub, chain them together, or completely randomize the connection. The pattern you create doesn't matter and has no effect on how the resources are shared. In this example, I've created 3 main hubs at Starlight Drive-In, Kingsport Lighthouse, and Eager Tours Marina, with smaller trading connections linking the 3 hubs together. Now that we know how to set up a supply line, let's see what's actually shared between the settlements. Supply lines don't physically move items from one settlement to another. Instead, they make the components from junk items available across all connected settlements. For example, if there's a coffee pot stored in the workbench at Sanctuary, the coffee pot stays at Sanctuary. But the asbestos, plastic, and steel it contains become available for use at other connected settlements. The actual junk item doesn't appear in the other settlement's workbench. In this example, Starlight Drive-In, Sanctuary, and 10 Pines Bluff are connected by a supply line. The 10 Pines workshop is empty, but if we enter building mode at 10 Pines, we can still use the building components stored in the other settlements' workbenches to build at 10 Pines. Ingredients used for cooking are also shared across the supply line, including dirty water and plant or animal ingredients. The same thing applies to crafting chems. Components needed to craft chems, including plants, water, and required junk components, are available from connected settlements. Excess crops can also be shared across the supply line. This includes any crop that can normally be planted in a settlement. Food and water surplus stored in the workbench from settlements producing more than they need can also help support settlements where resources are lacking. This is particularly useful for new settlements that are expanding rapidly, or for settlements such as the Boston Airport, where crops can't be planted. I've added Boston Airport to our supply line to demonstrate how this works. On the HUD, settlements that are being supported by excess food and water will show these values in the normal HUD color, even if those values are less than a settlement's total population. If the excess supply runs low and can no longer support the settlement, those values will turn red. If you have the Automatron DLC, you can build and assign robots as provisioners. I think they add a lot of immersion to the supply line system, and if equipped with the right weapons, they can be lethal fighters when traveling the roads throughout the game. However, historically there's been a problem with robot provisioners. The robot reset bug can cause a customized robot to revert to its original stripped-down model. That means that the Assaultron you carefully built and equipped with valuable resources could end up looking like a Protectron who's had a very bad day. I found a few with my 2 most recent characters that have reset. Why this happens? I don't really know. However, if your robot does reset, the good news is the supply line remains intact and resources continue to be shared between the connected settlements. Up to this point, we've been looking at how supply lines work from the settlement. But what actually happens out in the Commonwealth? I decided to follow a few provisioners to see where they go, how they travel, and what happens when they run into trouble. And I started with a question that might seem obvious. Yes, provisioners do actually walk between the settlements. You can follow a provisioner from one settlement to another and watch them travel the route. But what happens when the destination isn't connected by a normal road? That's where things get a little bit more interesting. Get to Nuka-World. Provisioners first walk to the Nuka-World Transit Center, enter through a loading door, and then walk to the entrance of the monorail. After attempting to open an already open door, the provisioner disappears and fast travels to Nuka-World. To return to the Commonwealth, she enters the transit system monorail, repeating much of the same behavior as before, including opening an already open door. Far Harbor works in a similar way. The provisioner walks to the boat dock near the Nakano House and then fast travels to Far Harbor. To return, the provisioner walks to the dock in Far Harbor and then fast travels back to the Commonwealth. The way different provisioners get to Spectacle Island was particularly interesting. Human provisioners actually swim between the castle and Spectacle Island. Robots with Mr. Handy thrusters appear to glide through the water. But Assaultrons have a bit more of a struggle. They walk to the end of the dock, get tangled up with the Brahmin, and after a very long time, somehow make their way into the water. After they're in the water, they appear to walk submerged on their journey to Spectacle Island. Sometimes it just works. That led to another question. Can provisioners actually be killed while traveling the route? Provisioners are set as protected, which means they can only be killed by the player character. I tested this using a console command to check the status of the provisioners. A value of 1 means the NPC is protected, while 0 means they are not protected and be killed along the route. I checked several provisioners and found that they were protected. So while provisioners may run into danger along their routes, they're protected from being killed by normal enemies. But that made me wonder about something else. What about environmental hazards such as radiation or drowning? To test this, I followed a provisioner traveling from the castle to Spectacle Island. This route exposes the provisioner to both potential hazards. I used a console command to check her health before and after the journey, and found that her health was unchanged. It appears that environmental hazards won't harm provisioners either. After following provisioners all over the Commonwealth, I think it's safe to say that supply lines are a little more interesting than they first appear. And despite all the dangers along the way, provisioners are surprisingly difficult to kill. So the next time you see a provisioner wandering past your settlement, you might look at them a little differently, because they're doing a lot more than just taking a walk. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you at our next build site.